PJ45 here. We're going to talk about John Henry. I'm going to tell you the story, and then I'm going to tell you the true story. John Henry was a slave. Not in the true story, in the fake story that Disney made. He was born a slave, and he was in love with this woman who was also a slave, and they couldn't be involved with each other because their owners would whip them. And I gotta remind you, this is the Disney version. It's not as dark as the real version. The real version's really dark. I'm just saying, in the Disney version, they get whipped for being with each other. Then the Day of Jubilation or whatever, where Abraham Lincoln signs the document of no more slaves. So John Henry broke the chains he had on his arms and vowed never again someone would be slaved. So sorry, a little snot in my throat from allergies. I don't have coronavirus. I don't. Anyways, so after that, he got married to the other slave, where both of them are no longer slaves. So they got married, and she gave him a hammer made out of the chains he broke. And he said, Polly, which is the woman's name, I would die with this hammer in my hand. So then they went out, searched for a job and a place to call home. And they heard that the railroad people were gonna or giving people a deal where if they help make the land, help make the train tracks, they would get land. 20 acres for those who finished the track. But they were already tired and worn out, and they have a deadline. So John Henry helps them. And then while they're working on it, everyone's singing about tall tales about John Henry that aren't true. But they could be. I don't know if they are true or not in the Disney story, if they're true or not. I know they're not true for the real story, but for this story that Disney was doing of John Henry, I don't know if those tales were real or not, because they did call them tales. So I'm not sure. But anyways, after that, a steam drill pulls up, and the guy in it is getting ready to do stuff. And one of the guys, this guy who is like management or whatever, says we had a contract, and the guy grabs the contract and burns it into the engine, the fire engine part of the steam drill. And everyone freaks out, and tries to tip it over, but John Henry stops them and gives a challenge where he races steel. he seems to have won, but the deal was until sunset. And it's not sunset yet, and the reason they thought he won was because he stopped at a cave. But the steam drill started drilling, which makes him fall down sad. Which Polly, his wife, comes up with him and gets him to cheer up and tell him to try to do it. And one of the other workers gives him another hammer, and he wins the race through the mountain, while the steam drill gets into an accident, and the guy in the steam drill, I assume, dies in the cave. Well, John Henry pushed himself all the way to the limit, which made his heart stop, I guess. He had a heart attack, I think. And Polly comes up and kisses him and stuff, and everyone else is like putting their hats off and sad. John Henry didn't say anything, but he did look at his hammer, and she knew what he wanted. So she put the hammer he got from her in his hands, and he smiled. And he kissed her she kissed him on the head, and he died. Years later, she tells her son the story, which her son is John Henry. And that's the end of the story. Now, the real story is just dark, depressing, and sad. And it's not really that inspiring. John Henry got into a lot of trouble. He went to court. He kept winning the court because the judge was usually African American. But he stole food because he has no money, and he has no family, and he doesn't live anywhere. So he stole food from a store because he was hungry. The cops caught him, and he did get put into jail. And he got put into jail because the judge that time was white. Was my skin color. And he was racist as hell, so he got John Henry in prison. And John Henry wasn't a bulky guy. He wasn't tough. He wasn't big. He was actually small and skinny. So when he went to prison, they put him on the railroad thing to work in the tunnel areas because his stature was perfect for it. So he did work in a railroad. He did work in a tunnel. And it wasn't the Bend Tunnel. It wasn't the Bend Tunnel. It was a different type. It was a different type of tunnel. It was a different tunnel. The Bend Tunnel has the statue of him, but the statue of him is not accurate. But people said it was there back in the time where John Henry did do this, but that actually is a lie. That statue has actually been there a couple years after John Henry existed. But not right. That statue wasn't made right after he died at all. So it's not correct. Anyways. So he worked in the tunnel. And he didn't get masks. He didn't get anything like that. So So he got some sickness from little dust particles. I forgot what it was called, but he got that. He never got married, and he's a kid. He's a kid when this is happening. So he died days later. He died days later due to some illness from breathing in all the shit in the air inside the tunnel. Stuff that wasn't healthy for him. That had parasites, and those parasites ate at his lungs, heart, and stomach, and it killed him because of the work. And he was abused and whipped because he was African American. The whites only got beaten on when they did something wrong. And when they try to break out, they get like a dish duty or something. But the African Americans get beat on all the time. And if they try to escape, they get killed. John Henry did not try to escape. He tried to live out his sentence, and he failed because once the railroad was done, he's been affected by that virus for a while, and that's when he actually dies, is when the railroad's done. And people argue where his body is, on Mark grave or in the White House. I believe it's in the White House. The White House is not where the president lives, even though it's also called the White House. The White House is basically a building buried on. It's a building built on top of massive African American graves of that prison's murdered African American prisoners. And another thing is the autopsy report that is filed. Actually, in the file, it seems that John Henry might have died from that stuff he breathed in the tunnels, but it might not be how he died, because in the autopsy files, he had a gash in his head and a gash in his chest, and the gash in his chest is not like a cut, even though that's what a gash is. It was like it was a piece inside his body moving towards his heart. A piece of stone or whatever. And then on his head was like a wound that was so deep it should have killed him. But no one knows if it's the heart. No one knows if it's the piece in his chest going towards his heart, or what he was breathing in, or the head injury, or all three. No one knows which one's which. But the most popular theory that I heard about was, well, basically the stuff he breathed in. That's why I mentioned that first. And people believe that it was foul play, because they believe that most of the people who were working in the tunnel with him did have masks, and he was the only one who didn't. But that might not be true. Um, and him having a wife is because there was girls in that prison. There were African American girls and there were African American boys. There were white prisoners and there were both male and female white prisoners. So basically it was male and female prison. And there was this girl who was basically obsessed with him or whatever. She wouldn't stop drawing him, and she wouldn't stop uh doing some other stuff that was kind of weird and out of boundaries. She was obsessed with him, and he liked it because they were both the same age and shit. But they weren't married. They weren't officially dating. And plus, she was just a psychopath. I don't know. And then there's like the thing about him being tall and muscular. There's nothing that was based off of. That was Walt Disney's imagination. Or whoever else made the story. Because Disney did not really make the story. This story has been told over and over and over again, and it's always, the story has changed. But the two stories I told you, one was Disney's interpretation, the other one was real life, about John Henry in real life. He was not a good person. There were 3 other times he went to court, and one of them was breaking and entering, assault, and attempted murder. But the 4th one, which is the one and he actually got to go to jail, but which was stealing food because he couldn't pay, because he didn't have a home, a family, money, or anything. And the reason for this is because he was like an orphan. He was an orphan at didn't want to be adopted, so he just wandered the world and stuff, I guess. I don't know that much about that part, about like before he robbed the store. I don't know about his life before he robbed the store. All I know about that is he had no home, had no family, had no money, and had no friends. That's all I knew. I don't know why he didn't. So that's what I'm saying. There's some parts of the story I just don't know. Like the history behind him, I don't know everything. I know mostly everything. Um the reason he got off of attempted murder is because the white man was proved to be lying about attempted murder. And the assault was to some white guy who was trying to kill him, and he fought back. And I don't remember what happened with the other one. But yeah, everything was justified. Except for the last one that he actually went to jail for. While he was in that prison, he carved a story in his cell about how white people and African Americans should be friends, and the history behind how he thought. It's not there anymore, but it was in the file about him in the prison. But the prison cell he was in that had the markings the markings are not there anymore. Because the cops got rid of it because they were white and they were racist. So they got rid of the message before anyone else could see it. Well, I am PJ45. See you 45 years later. I think you would like this story if you watched it all the way through. Leave a like and subscribe.